Bob Kustra has joined us on Sports Byline USA, president of Boise State University, and of course they have just been outstanding on the football field. Boise State 11-1 this season, 47-5 over the last 4 years, a dominating football performance by Coach Peterson and the players up there. Bob, let's talk a little bit about your jump from the WAC to the Mountain West Conference. Take me through the thought process about how this all started and what do presidents, athletic directors, and coaches, how do they work together to make the decision whether to jump from one conference to another?
Well, for us, in the Western Athletic Conference, we really enjoyed the competition, but we were faced with some difficult travel schedules. We had Hawaii and Louisiana Tech, and both of those took us to the far ends of the country, and as a result of that, when I first came here and was shown the opportunity to get into a Mountain West Conference that is really basically the intermountain region of the United States, it was very attractive because it cuts down on the travel time. And everybody thinks about football, Ron. Football, shoot, the football players get on a chartered plane and they go nonstop. No one thinks of volleyball. No one thinks of women's softball, diving and swimming. Those student athletes who have to get on 3 planes to find their way to their competition within the region. And so when you start changing these conferences and moving people all the way across the land, as we had to do with Louisiana Tech and Hawaii, it's really very difficult. So the great attraction for me as a president, I have to admit, it wasn't about the money. I thought that was great that we might be able to get closer to the BCS. It wasn't necessarily about the fact that we were joining some very high-quality academic institutions. That's important, too. But more importantly, I thought we should focus on the welfare of the student-athlete. And that was the first thing that got my attention about the Mountain West.
When you take a look at the WAC compared to the Mountain West, is visibility an important part of that decision?
Visibility, some of it. There's no doubt that the Mountain West has done a very good job. Now, the fact of the matter is, in all honesty here, some of that visibility was due to BYU. It was due to the University of Utah, 2 very strong and powerful schools right in the middle of the conference. And bingo, we no sooner joined up and they were gone. But the good news on that side is that in the meantime, Fresno and Nevada comes in, and those are 2 of our choicest competitors in the WAC, so we're delighted to have them join. And then on top of that, TCU takes off, and that was something, needless to say, that we didn't want to see. But when it's all said and done, we're a strong 9-member conference, and it's still better for Boise State to be in this Intermountain region with the Mountain West as opposed to where we were. And again, that says nothing about the WAC. The WAC was a great conference for Boise State, but again, as we look to the future, I think this is where we need to be.
Let me talk a little bit about a playoff format, because I know that this is really decided. Most people do not understand that the NCAA is really made up of the universities, and it's usually the chancellors and the presidents, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, Bob, that end up making the decisions when it comes to the NCAA. What is the major complaint about having some type of either limited or even a larger playoff format to determine a true national championship in football?
The objection I usually hear, which I don't understand, but I'll give it to you, is the fact these presidents all complain about the impact on the academics, on the study life of the student. Well, I mean, I don't even begin to understand that argument. Any playoff system I've seen is going to start at the end of the season. It's going to start at the end of finals or somewhere around there, and it's going to be finished by the beginning or maybe 1 week into the second semester. When you compare that to basketball, which eats up both semesters and takes the students into March when it comes to the Sweet 16 and the Final Four, the football playoff could be much less of an impact on a football player's studies than basketball is. So it never has made any sense to me, but it's the only argument I've ever heard presidents talk about when they discuss this. I think in some cases it may be a little bit of a red herring, where it's really about holding on to the BCS system, and the only arrow in their quiver is this one. Let's use academics and see if anybody goes for it.
What about the argument about protecting the bowls, which I think is bogus as well? And I'll tell you the reason why. Anytime you have somebody who's 6-6 in a bowl, that's not a reward. That's only filling a spot in my mind. And it really bothers me to see that. I mean, you take a look at a Temple, which is 8-4. is not going to a bowl game, but yet you've got a school like Connecticut that's going to be in a BCS bowl game, and that bothers me as well. I mean, protecting the bowls from what?
Exactly, and I think there's a way to work the traditional bowls into a playoff system.
I agree.
If you take a look at Dan Wetzel's book that he wrote with his two colleagues from Yahoo Sports, Death of the BCS, they propose a playoff system there. I'll admit I'm not a guy that's going to get down into the details of a playoff system. I'll leave that to conference commissioners and athletic directors, but I think they make a very compelling case for how you can do this while at the same time respecting those traditional bowls that people don't want to see go away.
The fact that they've been able to do it at Division II, is that an indication that it could be done at your division?
Boy, you just hit the nail right on the head, Ron. Division 2 and 3 are both great examples in many respects of how you can get the job done, and all of the arguments they use fall on deaf ears as far as I'm concerned when you just look at the other models out there.
Are we moving, Bob, to super conferences? And what I mean by that, I had a friend of mine about 15 years ago said there's going to be anywhere between 4 and 6 conferences, and that's going to be about it. They'll have divisions just like they have in the NFL and everything. But, I mean, when you see Nebraska going to the Big Ten, TCU going to the Big East, and those type of jumps and everything, are we moving towards super conferences?
I don't think there's any doubt we're moving in that direction. I don't know whether I'm the guy that can predict where it starts or where it stops. Does it keep on moving? Does it stop here for a while? Do we sort it all out and find out what's going on? I wish I could tell you I had those answers, Ron, but there's no question that if you look at what's happened just in the last few months, certainly with Colorado and Utah expanding the size of the Pac-10 on the West Coast and other changes with TCU joining up on the East Coast, they're getting bigger. There's no doubt about it.
One of the things that I don't understand is that I really think the NCAA is turning into the inmates running the asylum. If you take a look at their decision on Auburn quarterback Cam Newton, how concerned are you as the president of a university to see that decision come down and the kind of reasoning, whatever that is, that they used to say that he's eligible in light of what his parents did? I had a friend of mine that I respect and somebody that I know you would respect if I told you their name. He said to me, it's going to be open season. Any parent can go ahead and put their kid out for bid, and it's not going to hurt the kid or anything else. There's not going to be any discipline when it comes to this sort of thing.
Well, I think that sums it all up. I think the NCAA has its greatest obstacle ahead of it when it comes to regaining the confidence of people across America who believe in intercollegiate sports. I am absolutely astounded at how many people have come up to me on the street, at games last week, wherever I have been, and talk about the NCAA in the most derogatory fashion I've ever heard. I think they've undermined the confidence that people might have had in the NCAA, and they're going to have to fix it. I mean, there is no way that they can ignore this. They're going to have to get right back to work and figure out a way to put some very clear rules in place that are along the lines of consistency, because right now it really looks like the NC double standard instead of the NCAA.
But, Bob, isn't the NCAA ill-equipped to be able to do that? Because if indeed we're talking about presidents and chancellors being the power in the NCAA and in the decision-making and the rule-making and everything else, aren't we talking about people? I mean, you're educated and you sound like you know sports, but there's a lot of guys that I've talked to don't know. I mean, they're academics. They don't know whether the ball's stuffed or blown up.
Well, there's probably some truth to that. And also, if you take a look at who sits around the Division I Board of Directors of the NCAA, if you're to take a vote on reform, it's likely that the power conferences are going to vote out in front of the other conferences. I mean, the fact is the deck's a bit stacked on that score. But if those of us who believe there's a place for reform, if we keep speaking about it, if we speak up. I think one of the problems right now is that, unfortunately, the only presidents that speak up are the presidents who are most directly affected by the impact of the BCS. And, of course, it's easy for me to speak up because we have particularly been aggrieved this year. But I think year in and year out, presidents, no matter where their teams fall in the non-automatic qualifying conferences, have to be the one to stand together. And before long, I think change is going to come.
You know, I can't see somebody from a university in which it's a big football power, and you think of Southeast Conference, some of those schools, the Floridas, Auburn's, Alabama's. I can't really see a president or a chancellor standing up and saying, we can't do this anymore. It's got to be done this way, if indeed it will hurt the program that everybody supports. Because I've also said this, that presidents are caught between a rock and a hard place. They want to be able to get people that will contribute or give money to their schools. But if they do something that they don't like about a particular program, and in this case a sports program, Bob, then they're probably going to say, well, forget it. You're not going to get my check. I mean, aren't we talking realistically that's probably not going to happen from the powers? I agree. If the Southeast Conference says this is never going to happen again, the Big Ten said that or whatever, then you probably would get change. But I don't know. I think you're a lone voice in the forest on these sort of things, and I'm concerned about that when it comes to college sports.
I see your point, Ron. The only thing I would say is that over the course of the last 2 years, I've received emails from fans from every state in which there's a power conference team, whether it's Nebraska, whether it's Texas, whether it's Florida, whether it's Georgia, fans who are absolutely and totally devoted to their team, but who absolutely agree with us that this present system doesn't make any sense. I'm not so sure that a president of a power conference couldn't stand up to his fan base and explain that it's just time for fairness and equity. It's time for a playoff system so that when they do get to one of these BCS conferences, they can say they earned it instead of having it be based on some kind of a rigged system as it is now.
Does that put more pressure then on the coaches? I mean, if you open it up and we know if there's a playoff system, then, Bob, it's going to be big money going to the winning team in that, and I'm just wondering whether that escalates the arms war in college sports.
Well, the arms war in college sports is another issue that I think the NCAA is going to have to address. Miles Brand, the former president of the NCAA before his death, announced that the arms race had to be the NCAA's major challenge now that they had dealt with academic progress. And again, it may put more pressure on, but the fact is the NCAA cannot allow that to happen. There have to be some controls exerted somewhere because clearly it's getting out of hand.
We only have 2 minutes left, and I do want to touch on one other thing, and that is you've got a very talented coach in Coach Peterson up there, and invariably when somebody is successful, there's going to be other schools that aren't successful that they're going to go out and they're going to throw around $4 million, $5 million to try to woo him away. And I'm just wondering about where you see the whole coach's salary and just not the legality, but the morality of some of the things that are happening when it comes to coaches.
Well, we pay Coach Pete well. Coach Pete does not make here what he could make in a major power conference team. There's no question about that. He loves Idaho. He loves Boise State. He seems committed to this program. I think he feels that he can build the most solid career and have the most impact in intercollegiate football here at Boise State than he can anywhere else. There may become a day in the future when he changes his views on that. But in the meantime, I think if you take a look at the size of our football program, the size of the athletic budget, the size of Coach Peterson's salary, all of those ought to be used as models for the NCAA on how to really get the job done. I mean, there's no question that you can find coaches making 3 and 4 times what he's making, but when you turn around and look at the results, look what we have going here. Look how far along we've brought this program, not just in football, but in tennis and in gymnastics and in wrestling, and the list goes on. I think people ought to be using this program as a model, and certainly we're using Coach Peterson as a model football coach.
And, of course, he's only about 15 minutes away from Bogus Basin for skiing in his family.
You know this place really well, Ron, and that is a great attraction, let me tell you.
Hey, we've only got about 25 seconds, but we're heard worldwide by our forces in Iraq, Afghanistan, and elsewhere around the world. I know, Bob, you'd like to send out a holiday greeting to him.
I would very much like to do that. We just had a wonderful Veterans Day celebration here, honoring all of our veterans who have served and honoring all who serve in the armed forces. Idaho has just sent troops over to Afghanistan. We wish them safety. We wish them the very best. Most importantly, we thank them for their service to their country.
Thanks a lot, Bob. Take care. Let's stay in touch, okay?
Let's do it, Ron. I appreciate it.
Fine University president at Boise State, Bob Kustra, talking about the program up there, the success of Boise State, and also about sports in general, athletics at the college level. We continue with more of you and America's Sports Talk Show.